latest developments with another night of protests in the East Bay. Thousands of protesters taking over freeways, train tracks, and streets. The demonstrators protesting the decisions by grand juries to not indict white police officers in the deaths of unarmed black men. Interstate 80 shut down last night in Emeryville, right by IKEA and Powell Streets, as you see here. And the protesters then moved on to surface streets and outside the Ross store at the Powell Street Plaza in Emeryville. The CHP saying more than 150 of those protesters were arrested for blocking the freeway, and you can see them lined up along the building. As many as 1,500 protesters were out on the streets last night.
It's calmer this morning in Berkeley after the chaos. KRON 4's Will Tran is live there now with more on the situation as it stands at this hour. Hi, Will.
Good morning, Doria. Yes, there's a backup now in Emeryville, but it has nothing to do with the protesters. That's your normal morning commute. But yesterday, this place came to a standstill in both directions when all of a sudden those protesters, and they never make an announcement on what they plan to do, it just usually happens, they hopped onto the freeway after they broke down a fence. You can see a fence here. They have fencing all up and down I-80, but not at this location, but they got through. The CHP officers had to watch what was going on, and then it took them actually about 3 hours to get them off at the freeway. Let's show you some video of those officers. This is from high above. You can see what it did. The CHP officers, they didn't know how long it was going to last. Perhaps they would have went to the other side of the freeway, but no, it took a lot longer to the point where they had to call in mutual aid. There was a woman who was pregnant, stuck in this traffic area, that she had to call the ambulance. The ambulance then took her to the hospital. So not only does it have to do with the indictments, but people who have nothing to do with it, they also were impacted. And then they got back onto the city streets in Emeryville at the Berkeley-Emeryville border. Let's show you video of that. This is at Ross. They did not make the arrests onto the freeway. Instead, they just monitored what was going on. Once they got back onto the city streets near the Ross in that shopping center, that's when the CHP officers moved in. They had their buses waiting to go, and that's when they ultimately made their 150 arrests. We have learned this morning that the Berkeley Police Department, and they seem to be at the center of all of these protests, they also made 9 arrests themselves. The good news is none of the drivers were injured, and none of the protesters, as far as we are hearing, they were not injured as well. A lot of people have reached out to me on Twitter claiming police brutality. We will try to get reaction from the police department, but as far as we know, none of those police officers, CHP or mutual aid, they were injured in this. It seems like it was more disruptive than destructive from the previous couple of days. Back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Will. Mark?
And more on what happened with Amtrak last night. The train's running this morning, service back to normal, but you see protesters here stopping an Amtrak train by lying on the tracks. They also parked a truck on the tracks over near the Alston train crossing. But again, service now back to normal this morning.